"Let's make this clean," Derek said, sliding the divorce papers across our marble kitchen counter. I stared at the documents, my coffee growing cold in my hands. He didn't even look nervous, just eager, like he was closing a business deal he'd been planning for months. Before the inheritance clears, he continued, checking his watch. "It'll be simpler for both of us." My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept my face blank. 3 years of marriage, and this was how it ended. Not with tears or explanations, just paperwork and his impatient fingers drumming on granite. What Derek didn't know was that his mother, Eleanor, had pulled me aside 2 weeks before she died, her frail hand gripping mine, eyes sharp despite the morphine. "Read page 17 of the will," she'd whispered. "After I'm gone, not before. And never with him watching." I thought grief had confused her, but now, watching my husband's smug expression, I understood. Eleanor had seen this coming. She'd prepared for it, and she'd made sure I wouldn't be the one left with nothing. Derek tapped the pen against the counter. "Veronica, you okay with this?" I picked up the pen. He smiled. I smiled back. My hand shook as I touched the pen to paper. Derek mistook it for sadness. He actually patted my shoulder, like I was a child who'd scraped her knee. "It's for the best," he said softly. "We both know this hasn't been working." I wanted to laugh, or scream. Maybe both. Instead, I set the pen down. "Can I just have a day to process this?" His jaw tightened, just for a second, then the mask slipped back on. "Of course, take your time. Just not too much time, okay?" He kissed my forehead before leaving for work. The same way he used to kiss me goodnight when we were happy, when I still believed the man I married was real. I watched his car pull out of the driveway, then walked straight to my home office. The copy of Eleanor's will sat in my locked drawer, exactly where I'd hidden it after the reading. Most people only paid attention to the first 16 pages, the properties, the stocks, the cash distributions. Page 17 was handwritten, in Eleanor's shaky cursive. I read it again, just to be sure. Then I smiled for real. 2 years ago, everything was different. We attended Eleanor's annual charity gala together. Derek drank too much champagne and got loud near the dessert table. I tried to steer him toward the exit, but he shook me off. "Veronica's just here for decoration," he told 2 board members from his company. "Pretty face, empty schedule. You know how it is." They laughed. Uncomfortable, polite laughs. I laughed too. Smiled, played along. But something cracked inside me that night. Something I couldn't repair. On the drive home, he apologized. Said the alcohol made him stupid. Promised it would never happen again. I forgave him. But I didn't forget. I started keeping a journal after that. Nothing dramatic. Just notes, dates, comments he made when he thought I wasn't paying attention. Eleanor noticed the change in me. She invited me to lunch the following week, just the 2 of us. "He's not kind to you," she said quietly, watching me over a teacup. I denied it, made excuses. She just squeezed my hand and said, "I see more than you think." Our wedding was fast. Too fast. We'd only been dating 8 months when Derek proposed. I was 26, working as a museum curator, completely swept up in his confidence and charm. "Let's do it next month," he said. "Why wait when you know it's right?" I agreed. My parents flew in from Oregon. We had a small ceremony at a vineyard. 3 days before the wedding, Derek handed me a pre-nuptial agreement. "Just standard stuff," he assured me. "Protects both of us if anything ever happens." I was too embarrassed to ask questions. Too worried I'd seem difficult or suspicious. So I signed it. I didn't have a lawyer review it. Didn't read the fine print. Just trusted him. Now, sitting in my office with Eleanor's will in front of me, I finally understood what I'd signed. The prenup stated that if Derek filed for divorce within 5 years of receiving a major inheritance, he would forfeit all rights to shared assets. He'd written it himself, probably thinking he'd never be stupid enough to trigger it, but he was about to be exactly that stupid. Eleanor's cancer came back aggressive and fast. Derek was always too busy to visit her. Work meetings, golf trips, networking events. So I went instead. I picked up her prescriptions, sat with her during chemotherapy, read to her when she was too weak to hold a book. One afternoon, she grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. "Page 17, she whispered. "After I'm gone, read it alone." Her eyes were glassy from medication, but her voice was clear. "Don't let him see it first. Promise me." I promised. 2 weeks later, she passed away peacefully in her sleep. Derek cried at the funeral. Big, shoulder-shaking sobs that made people whisper about how close they were. I didn't cry. I just held his hand and stayed quiet. Because I knew something he didn't. Eleanor hadn't trusted her son, not with me, not with her legacy. And she'd made absolutely certain he'd pay for every cruel word, every dismissive glance, every moment he'd made me feel small. The will was her final gift to me, and her last lesson to him. The day after Eleanor's funeral, Derek changed. The grief vanished. The warmth disappeared. He started talking about his house, his plans, his future. I wasn't part of any of it. He stopped asking about my day, stopped pretending to care about my job at the museum. I became background noise in my own marriage. One morning I made him breakfast. He barely looked up from his phone. "You don't have to do that anymore," he said flatly. "Do what?" "Play housewife. We both know this isn't permanent." The words hung in the air like poison. I walked out of the kitchen without responding, went upstairs to my office, and started saving everything. Every text message where he was cold or cruel, every email where he excluded me from decisions, every voice message where his tone made me feel worthless. I created a folder on my laptop labeled Garden Plans. He never checked it. Inside were screenshots, recordings, documentation of every single moment that proved what kind of man he really was. I didn't know what I'd need it for yet, but I was ready. The will reading happened at Eleanor's lawyer's office downtown. Derek sat beside me, leg bouncing with impatience. He kept checking his phone, barely listening as the lawyer outlined Eleanor's estate, the house in Connecticut, the vacation property in Aspen, the stock portfolio worth $40 million, and then the main inheritance, $210 million, held in trust to be distributed to her son upon completion of probate. Derek's eyes lit up. He actually grinned. The lawyer continued reading, page by page. When he reached page 16, he paused. "That concludes the primary distributions," he said. Derek started to stand. "Great, when do we—" "There's one more page," the lawyer interrupted. Derek sat back down, but the lawyer didn't read page 17 aloud. He just shuffled the papers and said, "That's all for today. If there are questions, please contact my office." Derek didn't ask questions. He was too busy calculating his future. I stayed silent, because I'd already read page 17, and I knew exactly what it said. That night, I locked myself in the bathroom and read Eleanor's handwritten note again. Should my son initiate divorce proceedings against Veronica Ellings within 90 days prior to or following the distribution of this inheritance, his entire share shall be forfeit and redirected in full to Veronica Ellings. Below that, in smaller writing, "He will use you until he doesn't need you anymore. Don't let him." I pressed the paper against my chest and breathed. Eleanor had known. She'd seen Derek's cruelty long before I admitted it to myself. This wasn't just about money. It was about protection, dignity, making sure I wasn't thrown away like I never mattered. I took a photo of the page and saved it in 3 separate places. Then I went downstairs and made Derek dinner. He barely acknowledged me. But I didn't care anymore, because in 73 days his inheritance would clear, and if he divorced me before or shortly after, he'd lose everything. I just had to wait and make sure he didn't suspect a thing. Eleanor never said it directly, but I knew. She saw the way Derek treated me, the way he ignored my opinions at family dinners, the way he introduced me as my wife, but never by name. One afternoon, about 6 months before she got sick, we were having tea on her porch. "You're too good for him," she said suddenly. I started to protest. She held up her hand. "I love my son, but I'm not blind. He's selfish, always has been." I didn't know how to respond. She looked at me with tired, knowing eyes. "Just remember, Veronica, you're worth more than he'll ever appreciate." At the time, I thought she was just being kind. Now I understood. She was planting seeds, preparing me for what was coming. Eleanor had spent her whole life watching her son chase money and status. She knew exactly what he'd do the moment he inherited her fortune, so she made sure he couldn't do it without consequences. The clause wasn't just legal protection. It was a mother's final attempt to teach her son a lesson he'd refused to learn. I was watering plants on the back patio when I heard Derek's voice through the open window. He was on the phone with his college friend, Kyle. "It's basically done," Derek said, laughing. "She'll cry for a week, but I'll set her up with something. Maybe 20 grand. Enough to feel generous. Kyle said something I couldn't hear. Derek laughed harder. The money clears in 2 months. After that, I'm free. New house, new life. Maybe I'll finally get that place in Miami. My hands froze on the watering can. He kept talking. She's been fine. I mean, she's nice enough. But come on. She works at a museum making $40,000 a year. What's the point? I set the watering can down carefully, pulled out my phone, started recording. He went on for 10 more minutes, bragging, planning, talking about me like I was an expired lease. When he finally hung up, I stopped the recording and saved it. Then I went back to watering the plants, smiling. I scheduled a meeting with Eleanor's lawyer, Harrison Blake, under the pretense of asking about estate taxes. He welcomed me into his office with a warm handshake. "What can I help you with, Mrs. Whitman?" I slid a copy of page 17 across his desk. "Does this clause still apply if divorce proceedings are initiated before the inheritance clears?" He read it carefully, then looked up at me with raised eyebrows. "Yes, the language is clear. If your husband files for divorce within the specified time frame, the entire inheritance transfers to you." "And he doesn't know about this page?" Harrison shook his head. "I didn't read it aloud during the official reading. Mrs. Whitman requested that I keep it private unless it became relevant." I exhaled slowly. "So if he files in the next 60 days, he loses everything." I nodded. "And if I file?" "The clause doesn't apply. It specifically addresses his actions, not yours." "Perfect." I thanked him and left. Derek thought he was in control, but Eleanor had handed me the keys. 2 weeks later, Derek sat me down with a folder full of papers. "I talked to my lawyer," he said. "We can make this quick. One-time payout, $50,000. No alimony, no property claims. You walk away clean." I blinked at him. "50,000? It's fair, Veronica. You didn't bring much into the marriage. This is me being generous." I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing. "I just need a few days to think about it." His expression hardened. "What's there to think about?" "It's a big decision, Derek. I need time." He sighed, annoyed. "Fine, but don't drag this out. I want it done before the estate clears." "Why the rush?" "Because I don't want this hanging over me. I want to move forward." I nodded slowly. "Okay, just give me a week," he agreed, reluctantly. What he didn't realize was that every day I delayed was 1 day closer to the inheritance distribution, and 1 day closer to triggering Eleanor's clause. I just had to keep stalling and keep smiling. I suggested couples therapy. Derek looked at me like I'd suggested we join a circus. "Therapy? We're getting divorced, Veronica. What's the point?" "Closure," I said softly. "I just want to understand what went wrong." He sighed dramatically, but agreed. Probably because he thought it would make him look like the good guy. We went to 3 sessions. I cried, asked questions, played the part of the heartbroken wife trying to salvage something. Derek played the part of the patient husband who'd simply grown apart from me. The therapist suggested we take more time, work through our issues. Derek said he'd think about it. I knew he wouldn't, but it bought me 2 more weeks. Every session I watched the calendar, counting down. The inheritance was set to clear in 41 days. If Derek filed for divorce now, he'd lose everything. He just didn't know it yet, and I wasn't about to tell him. Derek moved into a luxury penthouse downtown. The inheritance hadn't even cleared yet, but he'd already spent over $400,000 furnishing the place. He sent me a photo of the view, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. "You should come see it," he texted. "You'd love the terrace." I didn't respond. Instead, I ordered a housewarming gift. Expensive champagne with a card that read, "Enjoy it while it lasts." He probably thought I was being bitter. He had no idea I was counting down. 33 days until the money cleared. 33 days until his arrogance destroyed him. I started packing my things slowly, 1 box at a time. He didn't notice. He was too busy shopping for furniture and planning his new life. A life that was about to vanish the moment he signed the final divorce papers. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. I saw her on his private Instagram story, blonde, 29, marketing executive at some startup. They were at a rooftop bar, drinks in hand, her head on his shoulder. The caption read, "New Beginnings." I stared at the photo for a long time, not because I was heartbroken, but because I was fascinated. He really thought he'd won, that he'd gotten away with it, that I'd just disappear quietly, I screenshotted the post and added it to my folder. Then I texted him, "She seems nice." He didn't respond for 3 hours. When he finally did, it was just, "It's not what you think." I replied, "I don't think anything. We're getting divorced, remember?" He liked the message. I smiled. 28 days left, and he was walking straight into the trap Eleanor had set for him. Blind, arrogant, predictable, perfect. Harrison Blake called me on a Tuesday morning. "The estate has been finalized," he said. "Distribution is set for 5 days from now." My heart raced. And the clause? Still active. If your husband files for divorce within 90 days of distribution, the terms apply. What if he's already filed? Has he? He's planning to, this week. Harrison was quiet for a moment. "Then you need to make sure he follows through. Once he files, the clock starts, and he loses everything." I thanked him and hung up. Then I texted Derek, "I'm ready to finalize everything. Let's meet tomorrow." He responded immediately. "Finally, I'll have my lawyer draw up the papers." I sat back in my chair, hands shaking. This was it. 5 days until the inheritance cleared. 24 hours until Derek signed away his entire future, and he had absolutely no idea. I thought about warning him for half a second. Then I remembered the gala, the cruel words, the way he'd made me feel worthless. And I let the moment pass. We met at a cafe downtown, neutral territory. Derek brought his lawyer. A sharp-looking woman named Claire who barely acknowledged me. "We've prepared a final settlement," Claire said, sliding papers across the table. $50,000 plus a non-disclosure agreement. I looked at Derek. "Non-disclosure?" he shrugged. "Just to keep things private, you understand." I picked up the NDA and read it slowly. It prohibited me from discussing our marriage, his finances, or Eleanor's estate with anyone. Ever. I set it down. "And if I don't sign?" "Then you get nothing," Derek said flatly. I reached into my bag and pulled out page 17 of Eleanor's will. I slid it across the table. Derek frowned. "What's this?" "Read it." He picked it up, started reading, and then his face went pale. Claire leaned over, reading with him. The silence was beautiful. Finally, Derek looked up at me. "Is this real? Ask your mother's lawyer." "You knew about this?" "Eleanor told me before she died." His hands shook. "This isn't enforceable." Claire cleared her throat. "Actually, it is." Derek stared at her, then at me. "You set me up." I smiled. "No, you set yourself up." Derek's voice cracked. "We can fix this. We don't have to finalize anything." "Yes, we do." "Veronica, please, I made a mistake. We can work this out." I looked at Claire. "Is the divorce filing still active?" She nodded reluctantly. "Yes, he filed yesterday." I turned back to Derek. "Then it's done." He grabbed my hand across the table. "I'll withdraw it. We'll stay married. I'll do better. I swear." "You called me dead weight," I said quietly. "You told Kyle I was worthless. You planned this entire divorce around your mother's money." His face crumpled. I was angry. I didn't mean it. "Yes, you did." I stood up, collecting the papers. Claire tried to speak. "Mrs. Whitman, perhaps we could negotiate." "There's nothing to negotiate," I said. "The clause is clear. He filed for divorce within the restricted time frame. The inheritance is mine." Derek's voice rose. "You can't do this." "I'm not doing anything. You did this to yourself." I walked out of the cafe, and I didn't look back. Derek called me 17 times that night. I didn't answer. He showed up at the house at midnight, pounding on the door. "Veronica, open the door. We need to talk." I watched him through the window, desperate, furious, broken. I didn't open the door. Eventually, he left. The next morning, his lawyer filed an emergency motion to pause the divorce proceedings. Harrison Blake called me. "They're trying to reverse it." "Can they?" "No, the filing is official. The clause triggered the moment he submitted the paperwork." I exhaled. "So it's over?" "It's over." I hung up and walked to the window. The sun was rising. The sky was pink and gold, and for the first time in years, I felt free. Derek had gambled everything on his own arrogance, and lost. Eleanor had made sure of it. The estate transfer happened quickly. $210 million moved from Eleanor's trust into an account bearing only my name. Derek's name was removed from every document. Harrison called to confirm. "It's done. The funds are yours." I sat in my car outside the bank, staring at my phone. I'd never seen that many numbers in my life. Derek's lawyer tried to contest it, filed motions, argued the clause was punitive and unfair. The judge read Eleanor's will aloud in court, then dismissed the case. "Mrs. Whitman made her intentions clear," the judge said. "The clause is valid. Case closed. Derek left the courtroom without a word. I stayed in my seat for a long time, not celebrating, just breathing. Eleanor had given me more than money. She'd given me proof that I mattered, that I was worth protecting, and that Derek's cruelty would never define me again. The story leaked 2 weeks later. A distant cousin shared it on social media. The headline spread fast. Man divorces wife to keep $200 inheritance, loses everything due to secret will clause. Derek's phone number changed. His social media went private. Mine blew up with messages, some supportive, some cruel. Most just curious. I didn't respond to any of them. I hired a publicist who released one statement. Mrs. Whitman is grateful for the late Mrs. Eleanor Whitman's generosity and foresight. She has no further comment. Short, clean, final. Derek tried to do interviews, tried to paint himself as the victim. No one bought it. The internet loves justice, and this was justice served cold. I deleted my social media apps and focused on what came next, because this wasn't the ending. It was the beginning. The divorce was finalized on a rainy Thursday. No payout for Derek, no property, no rights to anything we'd shared. The prenup he'd made me sign years ago had a clause he'd forgotten. If he initiated divorce within 5 years of a major inheritance, he forfeited all shared assets. He'd written it himself, probably thinking he'd never be stupid enough to trigger it. But he had, and now he had nothing. I kept the house, the car, everything. Derek moved back in with a friend. I heard he was working as a consultant now. Freelance, struggling. I didn't feel sorry for him, but I didn't celebrate either. I just moved forward, because that's what Eleanor would have wanted. Eleanor's house in Connecticut went up for sale. Derek tried to list it through a private broker, but I bought it first, through a shell company, anonymously. When the sale closed, I had my lawyer send Derek a letter. The property has been purchased by a private buyer. You are no longer listed as a resident or owner. He called me screaming. You bought it, didn't you? I didn't confirm or deny. I just said, Eleanor loved that house. I'm making sure it's taken care of. He hung up. I drove to Connecticut the following weekend, walked through the rooms where Eleanor and I used to have tea, and I cried. Not for Derek, not for the marriage, but for the woman who'd seen me when no one else did, who'd protected me when I couldn't protect myself. I would honor her memory, every single day. Derek filed one last lawsuit, claiming the inheritance was rightfully his, and that Eleanor had been manipulated or mentally unfit when she wrote the clause. The case went to court. I sat in the gallery calm and silent while his lawyers argued. The judge reviewed the medical records, the witness statements, the handwriting analysis. Then he read Eleanor's clause aloud, word for word. This woman was sound of mind and clear in her intentions, the judge said. Case dismissed. Derek stood frozen. His lawyer tried to argue. The judge banged his gavel. Dismissed. Derek turned and looked at me. I didn't smile, didn't gloat. I just looked back, and then I left. That was the last time I ever saw him. I didn't waste Eleanor's gift. I started a foundation in her name, focused on supporting women leaving difficult marriages, providing legal aid, housing, education. I bought a small firm, hired people I trusted, built something that mattered, and every time someone asked how I got started, I told them the truth. My ex-husband thought I was disposable. His mother made sure I wasn't. I never remarried, never needed to. I traveled, invested, donated. I lived the life Eleanor wanted for me. Free, strong, unshaken, and every year on the anniversary of her death, I visit her grave. I bring flowers, sit for a while, talk to her like she's still here. Thank you, I whisper, for seeing me, for protecting me, for loving me when he wouldn't. The wind rustles through the trees and I swear I can hear her voice. You were always worth it, Veronica. Always. I smile, stand, and walk back into the life she gave me, knowing I'll never let anyone make me feel small again.